Hello, once Forest Focus as Nottingham Forest have finally set to sign Douglas Luiz from Juventus. We'll discuss that deal in full, the possible return of Matty Cash, interest in Jose Angel Carmona, and answer a list of questions along the way. In the company of, first of all, Michael Temple. Temps, afternoon, how are you?
Good, thanks, fellas. Looking forward to chatting about more signings. And whatever Nuno was concerned about a week ago, surely he can't be now.
You'd think so. We'll certainly get into that. Pete Blackburn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I was going to warn about a delivery coming my way during the pod and the dog going mad, but she timed it nicely, so it all happened during the sparkly new intro there, and it's peaceful and quiet here now. So yeah, I'm good. I'm fresh from a pretty lengthy tour of Matt's kitchen and watching him from a sort of very unusual angle, largely focused on the sort of underside of his chin as he made a cup of tea, which was nice.
Plural, not singular. Plural.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, no, good. I tell you what, just referencing Tempter's point about more signings, it makes a bit of a difference from however many weeks ago when we were on it every single day talking about whether Igor Jesus was going to come or not, doesn't it?
I know, it certainly does. Mark Sutherland's, to quote Mark today, is in dreamland. That shows how much things have changed. When Douglas Luiz signed, he's very, very excited about it. Just before we get into Douglas Luiz, a couple of quick thanks. You will have heard the new music or pepped up music there. Thanks to, now I don't know if it's Tim or Tom, because I can't remember. He's only told me his name once years ago, and it's Televisor on Twitter. So if you're listening, send me your bank details for a start, and I'll send you a few quid because you did a great job. Also, Gabe, who did the video, same guys who did it last time. If you want posters, graphics, animations, or anything, it's at Angel of Origin on Instagram, and he will sort you out. Right, Douglas Luiz then, he is on his way by the look of it. David Ornstein saying that we've agreed a deal for 27-year-old. It's a loan deal with buy mechanisms for Forest at around 26 million quid. Obligation is based on games played or the option if the Brazilian international falls short of the required appearances. I mean, I very much like the terms of the deal. It seems perfect to me, Temps, but how are you feeling about it?
Totally agree. I mean, we laughed in the WhatsApp group earlier, didn't we, that if Chris Wood didn't have that obligation to buy, we probably wouldn't have, given his early showings for Forest compared to what he's become. So I don't mind that. We have to be mindful of the structures of these deals to ensure that we advantage ourselves as best we can in future PSR calculations. But I think every party expects this to become a permanent signing, and we should be happy with that. This is a match-ready Premier League player who's played a lot of minutes in a very good Aston Villa team. People that have watched him play week in, week out speak extremely highly of him. And I think our central midfield depth at this point in time is better than it's ever been. So really excited that we're plugging in a player that nobody needs to Google or do their research on. We've seen him operate at the top end of the Premier League for a long, long time. And this is a massive coup for Forest.
Yeah, I mean, I will discuss the PSR side of it. That certainly works. I feel like I've sounded negative on this deal in the last couple of days, and I'm not, because I think he's an excellent footballer and he improves our squad significantly. My only reservations were, as discussed yesterday with Dan Story and James Belshaw, around the finances a little bit. So hopefully that addresses it. Football-wise, we can look at him on the pitch now and see if he fits what we want to do. I think he will. I mean, he certainly offers control in games like we saw v Brentford. I did have a look at Aston Villa's average possession stats when he was there, and they were a little bit higher. So I think he'll be able to do the other side of the game and fit into us tactically, but this gives Nuno a chance to look at it. It's interesting, a few of the press briefings have really hung Edu's hat on it, and that was my only other thing. Is as everyone sat around the table and said, "Oh yes, please, this is the one we want," or as Edu really said, you know, and Kia Jarabchin, his agents, really pushed for him to come in. So I'll be interested to see how that shakes out. But I'm not negative on it at all. I do think he's a really good signing for us. Pete, just weigh. We discussed this at length, but it's a big deal for us. Pete, weigh in on where you're at.
I sort of agree with everything that both of you have said, to be honest, which might sound slightly odd because there's lots going on in that conversation. I think it's sort of illustrative of how far we've come that we're having a chat about signing Douglas Luiz, and we're talking about the sort of pros and the cons of it rather than just being, incredibly excited by it. I think fundamentally, he's a really good player, and assuming that there's not been any significant change in him, his ability, his conditioning or any of that sort of stuff over the season where he struggled a bit at Juventus, then Forest are getting a player who makes our squad better by a significant amount, and we're bringing in a footballer who is a genuine classy operator at the level. I think someone who probably brings some different skills as well. I think he has a sort of a range of passing, but also so many different styles of passing. He's someone who will play lots of lofted balls that are very different to the footballs that we currently have. I think he's got an awful lot of skills to bring to us. I do have some of those little concerns that you had. Certainly the finance was niggling for a while because of his age and the fact that, say he does 2 or 3 years here, perhaps you're struggling to recoup the sort of money you might need to for PSR and that sort of thing. But I think actually it sounds like, if the reports are correct, that we've got this down to a number and associated conditions that puts us in a pretty good place, I think. I have tried to ask around to get a sense of what number of games we might be talking about. I don't know if it's 5 or 25, but no one seems too sure on that right now. So it'll be interesting to see some of the details further. The other nagging concern, as you say, is the whole Edu-Kia-Drabshan link, which does worry me slightly. But like I say, I think we're getting a really good footballer and someone who helps us continue the building of Forest, both in terms of the quality and the squad depth, but also the evolution of Forest, because he's someone who can dominate games, I think, who can help us be much more penetrative. I think it will make a big difference to Forest. So we talked so many times in recent years, really, about how Forest have often struggled to break down teams when we've had more of the ball, or when we've really needed to if we've gone behind. So I think we're answering some of those questions again with another signing. And for all the slight niggling doubts, I do think fundamentally this is a player who brings a lot to the football club, and it'll be really exciting to see him play here.
Thank you very much to Prezi and Charlie Price for signing up for membership while we've been live. That's fantastic. Really appreciate that. 2 things, Temps. We do have listener questions and we'll get into those on this. One of these you might be repeating yourself a little bit, sorry. But firstly, set pieces. I feel it's a big upgrade or a big addition with him and McAtee. And secondly, this is where you might be repeating yourself. It's a different kind of signing, which goes on what Pete says. A lot of our success has been built on 23-year-olds. You're taking a bit of a punt on them, but there's massive upside around resale value. We haven't really signed proven 27-year-old players. Milenkovic to an extent, but from abroad. We've got Wood and we've got Sells, who are a different age profile. Ward-Prowse was sort of it, but that was a loan deal, and this feels like a much bigger deal, probably, I think, doesn't it? This is a kind of a statement signing and us venturing into new territory in that way, isn't it?
I'm increasingly relaxed about the young average age. I think the maturity of players like Elliot Anderson and Murillo relative to their years is particularly unusual. I think those 2 players have particularly high football IQs, and they don't need veterans around them, as we've seen in the weekend's match and last season. Davies Luiz is going to improve our set pieces. We haven't had a player that can stanch one from 25 yards. He's got that in the bag. I'd imagine he'd be on corners when he's on the pitch as well. Certainly got that ability to make defenders think about when it comes to shot versus cross. So that's a big upgrade. Look, the mix is important. You can't win everything with a bunch of 22-year-olds. You can't be upwardly mobile and afford to sign match value players. You still have to find those guys that you can add value to. But yeah, isn't it refreshing that we've got a plug-and-play central midfielder that's going to come and complement what we've already got? Interested in the mix. I think that the dynamic between the 3 that we pick in the formation, which it looks like we're going to be able to impose now in more matches, now that we're confident in our own skin and don't need to make as many changes to counteract the opposition, is particularly interesting. And I was impressed with Sangare at the weekend. I'd love to see him have the consistency to keep that space. But there's part of me that just wants to be that little bit more adventurous and twin Douglas Luiz with Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White at the same time, because I think that combination could be particularly dynamic. Not doing down on Sangare, but it was excellent the weekend. Just haven't seen my own eyes yet him able to maintain that form for a significant period of time, and he's going to have a bit of a holiday in January.
That's a really good point about Anderson and Gibbs-White and experience beyond players' years. I mean, Nico's only like 23, and he's probably played, I don't know, 150 games or 200 games or whatever it is in his career. I don't know. I'm picking that off the top of my head.
And that's just for Wales.
Yeah, 500 people with us, which is great. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. What Temple saying these into nicely to some of the questions that we had. So I'll read them all out. We'll probably take them in a bunch. But Richard Spray, channel member and of Talking Reds podcast fame. How do you envision the pecking order with the midfield when Luiz comes? Could Sangare be relegated to a bench role? And does that limit Anderson's ability to get into more attacking aspects of the game plan? Similarly, Smithy on Twitter, if you had to drop one of them, Sangare, Anderson, Gibbs White, who would it be to get Luiz in? And channel member David Grattan, the way I see it, not including Yates or Dominguez, our midfield options are Gibbs White, McAtee, Anderson, Luiz. And then you would have Sangare in there as well. I still think we need a number 6 to rotate with Sangare. It's an elite midfield rotation and a game changer. What do you think? Pete, how do you see the midfield shaping up then when everyone's available? If you had to, if Nuno was banking on his prime 3, which I think he does like to do, what do you think it'll be?
Yeah, it's a slightly difficult question to answer because there's so many competitions and so many games ahead of us. So there's going to have to be an element of horses for courses at some point. But I think you're right about your instinct on how Nuno sees things. And assuming that he's as on board with the signing of Luiz as those in charge of recruitment at Forest are, then I think my assumption can only be really that he's coming in as first choice in that area. I mean, he may have to prove himself and I suppose get attuned to both first team fitness and also the way Nuno wants to do things and the way that Forest want to do things over the coming weeks, because clearly he's not played the sort of amount of football that you ideally like the last 12 months or so. But I mean, my instinct is that if Douglas Luiz had been our first signing in the summer and we were going into that Brentford game last weekend, he'd have been playing in that role that Sangare played in. And that's how I assume things will settle. Just to pick up on a few of the other points, I mean, on the 6 thing, I wonder whether perhaps my preconceptions and my sort of narratives need to be challenged a little bit, and that perhaps that goes for some of those watching and listening as well. I have sort of generally assumed that the way forward for this Forest team would be to have a real sort of animal in that ball-winning role, and then to release Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White to go and be creative and be box-to-box and cover all the ground they want to and have some freedom to express themselves. And that's always how I've seen it, really. But it feels unlikely to me, I may be wrong again about this, this is all, real assumptive stuff. It feels unlikely that we're going to go out and get a high-class number 6 as well as all the other deals that we're looking to do and what we've already done. And if that's the case, then I think the way that Nuno and Forest must be looking at it is that we're happy with the system as it is, and what we're looking for is a blend in that double pivot. So we're looking for 2 players who can bring lots of different attributes rather than one player to sit in front of the back 4 and screen. I think it'll be a case of Elliot Anderson and either Sangare or Douglas Luiz developing that sort of relationship and both doing a bit of everything. And I don't have a worry about it particularly. I think in my dream world, Elliot Anderson would be free to roam wherever he wants. But when you watch him play for Forest, he does look like someone who wants to be in those deep areas as well, who does want to win the ball, who does want to make interceptions. And I think the reality of him is that he's so good that he can sort of do it all anyway. I don't think he needs to be high up the pitch to be able to have an impact. I think he can win the ball for us and he can turn the game on ahead from there. So hopefully, even if he is playing in that sort of double pivot role, Elliot Anderson will still be able to have a significant contribution in an attacking sense for us in helping us create and having an impact on the game as well as controlling things. So lots of assumptions and lots of sort of thoughts, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. My instinct is that Douglas Luiz comes into a 3 with the other 2, Gibbs White and Elliot Anderson, and we look to try and have more dominance in games. Douglas Luiz is probably more of a sort of natural. Well, I say he's probably the one who can do a bit of screening while Elliot Anderson rampages and is proactive in the tackle and all that sort of stuff. Well, whereas Douglas Luiz is more likely to look to nip in for the interceptions and then create play from deep, I guess. But that's how I see it. But I think horses for courses will have to come into play because there's so many games.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Elliot Anderson is a better deep lying playmaker than Morgan Gibbs-White, and where Morgan comes onto his own is when he gets the ball between the lines in the attacking third. So there's a lot to be said for Elliot Anderson being the one, if you like, that sacrifices his offensive positioning a bit if Douglas Luiz is to be the third of that three. But I don't expect an additional signing at 6. I think a fit Dominguez, bit part contributions from Ryan Yates, Sangare making a massive shout when he's in form gives us the depth that we need there. What we haven't quite seen yet is where we're going to deploy Hutchinson and McAtee, who both have the ability to play in the 10 or to drift wide. So that'll become clear when we get used to seeing how Nuno deploys these players. But yeah, I do think that we found a really special player in Elliot Anderson that can be in the same team as Morgan Gibbs-White and do a similar job in very different areas of the pitch.
Yeah, just one last thing, Matt. I think the really, really important thing about all of this, and we've said it, we talked around it so many times, it's no great insight, is that suddenly after the last couple of weeks, we're in a position where Nuno's going to be able to look around at his bench and there's going to be at least one striker who can make a genuine impact on a game. Another striker who in Jesus is probably someone who can play across multiple positions and can have a creative impact as well as being a willing runner and all that sort of stuff. He's going to be able to look at James McAtee and someone who can play 8 or 10 and bring an element of control or creativity to the game, maybe a long shot to try and get you back in a game. And then on top of that, he's got a winger in Hutchinson who is, a genuine potential game changer. And then plus now we're going to have somebody who can come on and bring more control or defensive stability or a bit of creation from deep in the central midfield area. And suddenly that is monumentally transformed the Forest squad. We didn't have any of those things last season. We had players who, they might come on and huff and puff a bit, or they would try hard and, had bits of ability in various areas, but nothing like the quality that we're looking at now. I think you are suddenly looking at a Nottingham Forest squad that is as good as you could possibly have hoped for it being, and a transfer window that is, arguably the best in the club's modern history.
Oh yeah, it's been a resounding success. We'll talk fullbacks in a bit, and there's still a little bit to do, but this is the kind of stuff we all really dreamed of at the start, certainly. And I agree with the lads what they were saying around the midfield balance. I know I'll put Pat's coming up about Fletch. Can't we just have midfielders who can do everything? Lewis is very big on this as well, not pigeonholing players. And when you've got players like Anderson and Gibbs-White who've got so much energy, they can do it. We're not talking like Casemiro and players like that here. We're talking players who can cover all the ground, and I think Luiz can do that as well. So I think that will end up being the balance. I'd probably just have Anderson. Imagine him playing slightly the deeper of the three, because when in the under 21 Euros, he was properly like running games, and I think he can do that from there, which in a way is a bit of a shame if he does end up playing slightly deeper. But I still think he'll carry a threat, certainly. Right, just before we crack on and talk, we'll talk a little bit more around finances of the deals and stuff like that. But just before we do, a word for the Trent Navigation. Sunday's game, which I see Palace want extra security for, which is just an insane situation that we'll pick up. We'll do that tomorrow, probably. It's on TV if you're not going and you want to watch it in peace. Then you can watch it at the Nav, get your dinner, get your breakfast there, get your lunch there, get your dinner there, make a day of it, and watch the Palace game, the West Ham game, and I think the Arsenal game. I'll check that one. But they're on the big screen at the Nav, certainly. Let's talk just a bit about the finances around it. A couple of questions. Richard Ottaway, Villa have got big wage to income ratio issues with UEFA. What stops us having the same next season? Will we need to bring in £100 million plus sales by June next year? Edward also asks, when does the squad cost ratio formula kick in? Given how deliberately constructed PSR and multi-club ownership regulations have been to preserve the status quo, are we going to face another administrative barrier to progress? An article from The Athletic here and a couple of other bits I'll just read out to put some context into it. Villa's transfer activity this summer has been stifled by various financial sanctions, such as the squad cost ratio, which states a club can only spend 71% of their revenue on player salaries. Villa had to be mindful of this, as the previous wage turnover ratio was 91%. I looked at Swiss Ramble for our figure. It was 88% a year ago and 94% a year before that. And we've increased our wage bill pretty significantly here. So what happened with Villa? They're fine. And Chelsea, this is from the BBC, Chelsea were fined €31 million. That's 26 million quid, the Douglas Luiz fee, effectively. And a further €60 million if they don't comply with the rules in the next 4 years. Villa were fined €11 million with a further 15 if they don't comply within 3 years. And they were fined for their income. It was above 80%, so that hit them with a fine. So that's one concern. Obviously, we're shifting I'm going on here. Sorry about boring financial stuff. We're shifting a deal into a different PSR window if we sign him, which is good. I think people forget the importance of wages in PSR deals. And if we have loads of players on 100 grand a week, then it might present an issue, which is the boring, miserable side of talking about stuff like this. But is that a concern, Pete, for you as well?
I think it will be a concern for everyone involved in the club because there's very tight restrictions and they will be hard to live with. And we've talked about it so many times, but the various financial regulations, whether it's PSR in the Premier League or wider FFP or squad cost stuff, that all of them are designed around rules that make it harder for clubs like Forest because we just don't have the turnover or the revenue to be able to compete in the way that you would probably like to, or certainly the way that the ownership of lots of clubs like ours would like to. The UEFA rules are stricter than the Premier League ones, so that it is going to be difficult for Forest. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it's not just wages; it's 70% of club revenue against player and coach wages, transfers, agent fees, lots of that sort of stuff. So it is hard. I did read a Swiss Ramble piece about it not too long ago, and I think he'd suggested that Forest would just about have been fine in the latest set of accounts, but it's actually really hard to see because, as I understand it, the UEFA financial regulations are done over the calendar year rather than the financial year. So it's very hard to be clear how Forest accounts, which are done June or July, whatever it is, end of June, will fit in with that. So there's a lot of guesswork to be done. To answer Ed's question, I think we will be monitored, and it's done on constant monitoring, I think, from January to December, I guess, because that's the calendar year that they UEFA do it over. Yeah, it is a concern, and I think we all have to be understanding and accepting of the fact that the only way that Forest can survive and compete in this world is to recruit well and to sell well. It's always going to come down to that. These rules are slightly harsher than the Premier League ones, so it changes nothing apart from that you've got to do it even better. And the only way to get around that will be that it will come to January windows or to the June deadline, and we will have to be looking at who we can move on for good money. It's a shame that we have to talk about football like that in many ways, but given that players always want to better themselves and move on to other things anyway, in a sense, it doesn't change things too much. But for Forest, it's always just got to be having the best culture, the best environment, the best recruitment we can, and then we sell people on as close to our terms as is possible. I think we did that relatively well with Anthony Elanga, and I think there will be opportunities to do that again in the future with Murillo. Elliot Anderson could well become a £100 million player at this rate, and I think that might sound to some of our fans and certainly to some other fans like mad hyperbole, but I don't think it's that crazy. So we're lucky that we've done things well so far. I say lucky, it's not luck, it's been good judgment, but we're in a position where we've future-proofed to a relative degree because there are players that we can move on for enormous profit, and that will cover the situation. Then it will be back to the drawing board and doing it all again. And I think they've done it again this summer with players who are young and will prove to be good value and will give us more future proofing in that regard. It's a shame that we have to talk about it. It is what it is. There's not much more we can say than I think you just have to keep doing things right and sell for the best price you can.
I just put up a couple of charts. These are old ones from that Swiss Ramble when I did it ages ago, where we ranked in Premier League wages, 23-24. So this is the season before last, but we were 9th in the Premier League table. So I imagine we'll have gone up a bit, but we're not threatening those top clubs. The Arsenal's upwards. Their wage bills are insane. I think this one I'm going to put up now is income and revenue. Aston Villa made 300 million and they're struggling. I think ours was 200 million. I'd have to check it, but you see the sums that some of these clubs are earning in the Premier League. Arsenal 700, these in euros, 716, Man U 770, Liverpool 700. We're competing with some huge financial entities, and the rules are set up very much in their favour, as we've said repeatedly. Weigh in on that, Temps, if you want, but also what Pete said was about the future proofing, and if we do have to sell, an Elliot Anderson. Then we've got a Douglas Luiz in the building already. We've got a James McAtee, etc., etc. It's an important point, I think, that we shouldn't underestimate as well.
Yeah, you do have to get to the point where no player is bigger than the club. And I think that the efforts that we made to keep Morgan Gibbs-White this summer demonstrate our judgment that he's the guy we're building the team around. But there'll come a time, as someone's made a point in the comments, where taking Murillo out of the 11 won't be as terminal as it perhaps may have been a year ago, 2 years ago. Same could possibly be said about Morgan if Elliot kicks on, these guys do well around him. We are going to sell a big player next summer. I think that's the kind of cornerstone of tweaking and rebalancing a squad is a big chunk of cash in, as we were able to secure the Elanga sale this year. But it's not part of the plan to dispose of two crown jewels at the same time. Hence why, in the context of the Elanga sale, we made such a scrap to keep Morgan. I don't like the fact that we have to talk about money and PSR calculations so often, right? We just want to turn up, watch great football, and celebrate a win. But it's vitally important that we operate within the parameters set by the Premier League and UEFA. They've shown their teeth in recent times. The financial circumstances are particularly important because of the potential for points deductions, transfer embargoes, and everything else. And whilst 2 years ago we perhaps thought it was a threat but no action, we've now seen that they're more than willing to follow through. So have to comply with that. We do have to raise our turnover. So this is how we're going to cope with having an owner that can provide the finance to cash flow these deals. But ultimately, that calculation of 71% of turnover comes from how can we maximize our broadcast, how can we maximize the profitability of our player trading, and how can we drive more match day income from tickets and secondary spending around the stadium and the retail and things like that. So this has to accelerate the need for stadium development. This has to accelerate the search for partnerships. We've all done a great job of driving our broadcast income by being in European competition next year and maintaining our share of the Premier League spoils. So much progress from our football club. 4 years ago, we're bottom of the Championship without a win. And it's nice that we're having these conversations, however technical and relatively boring they may be. But our financial shape is, in an income sense, is better than it's ever been. We just have to be mindful of their expenditure and make sure everything's manageable.
Excellent. We've got more questions that we'll do tomorrow around where we'll finish in the league and all that kind of stuff. But we'll keep the questions today just on the transfer, the stuff. And that leads nicely into Matty Cash, I guess. Another rule that you have to abide by or try to abide by to maximise your European squad is having homegrown players. Matty Cash would qualify as that, having come through our academy. Linked to the return by The Athletic today. It ticks a lot of boxes. Pete, what would your thoughts be on that if it were to happen?
I'm sort of protecting myself in a sense, I think, because I feel like it's unlikely to happen. It seems to me like it might be a bit ambitious to take the current starting right back for another Premier League club when they haven't got a replacement and there's only a couple of weeks left. And, they're going to be in a position where they maybe need two. Having said that, there's clearly, there are financial issues at Villa, so perhaps it is doable. I think if you were asking me about a player, we were sort of doing this blindly and I didn't know his name, I'd probably be slightly less enthused than I am. But obviously there is a romantic element to it, and having Cashy back and also the homegrown stuff you mentioned would feel special, and it would feel like a really nice moment where we've caught up to a player that left us to go and better himself. And there is a sort of lovely full circle element of that. Plus, away from the sort of the romance or the sentiment, I think he is a player who would improve our squad. I'd say I think he's somebody who, from my sort of vague dealings with Villa fans or from seeing bits and bobs here and there, I feel like he's a bit undervalued over there. He always seems to be the one that is talked about as the place where they need an upgrade. And I think maybe he's taken for granted slightly. I think he's got prodigious work rate. His defensive output's pretty good. Dan Cook, Danscape, did a nice tweet looking at his stats over the last couple of years. So I'd suggest having a look at that. But they suggest to me someone who's performing at a pretty high level and would make an impact for us. He'd obviously have competition on his hands in terms of getting a start in the side, but we've got loads and loads of games to play. And as we've discussed before, I think having three high quality fullbacks is a good place for Forest to be, ideally with perhaps another left-footed prospect to work on and to develop. So look, I'd be really excited about it, and I make no secret of part of that being the sort of sentiment of it. But I also think he would improve the squad, and it would be lovely to have him back.
It is interesting, like you say. We often say, "Oh, we just need a defensive midfielder. That was the one thing." Or we just need a striker. It is often Villa fans saying, "Oh, we just need a right back." I mean, he does seem a reliable defender. Temps to me. I wouldn't have him above Olorina or Nico personally, but he's a good Premier League defender. I would say that's what I would rank him as. What would you?
Exactly right. I don't think he gets in ahead of Olorina and Nico Williams. That's no disrespect to Matty Cash. They've had exceptional seasons. I think we remember fondly what he was to us when we watched him. I've just checked some stats. He played 91 games in that partnership with Joe Lolly, which was golden, wasn't it? Probably second only to Brennan Johnson and Jed Spence in recent memory. But we were watching him in the Championship, and the level that we're at has accelerated incredibly. I think it'd be a really, really difficult deal to do because he would find himself scrapping and probably playing second fiddle at first. That said, the positives on Matty Cash, he's a midfielder converted to a defender. We know how good he is on the ball. We know how advanced he can play and how he can assist our wing play by getting past his winger and stretching defences. So he does profile as the type of player that would work in Nuno's system, and I'd welcome the signing, but it's probably no longer a marquee signing, to be blunt. He would arrive as a squad player and have to scrap to find his place.
The pieces haven't said about a fee or anything. He said it would be a lower package than Rico Lewis overall, which was 30 million, and then significantly increasing his wages. So Cash must be on a good wedge as well at Villa. I think he signed a new contract while he was there. Rico Lewis looks like he's going to sign a new deal at City and stay. Are you a bit gutted, Pete, by that one or not?
No, not massively. I personally didn't think it was something that was likely to happen. Rico Lewis is, like, without doubt, a really talented footballer and someone who's operating at a high level at a young age and without an awful lot of football behind him. But I did struggle to see exactly how he'd work in a Nuno team personally. He doesn't strike me as the sort of defensive focus, intense player at fullback that Nuno would want. And also I can't see a Nuno team having a Rico Lewis in central midfield either, really. I think he's sort of in the perfect place where he is. He's one of that crew of Man City players who have now come through that, Guardiola has been there for so long now that players are actually coming through in the image of the sort of Guardiola ideology. So they come through as being, just multi-talented, multifaceted footballers who can play anywhere on a pitch and are all about the sort of the ideology and the style. And I just couldn't see how it really fitted for us. And given the money involved, that's a big deal. He's a very talented footballer, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it never really sort of rang true to me, to be honest.
Let's talk then about Jose Angel Carmona, is the player that Fabrizio Romano says we're in advanced talks for. He plays for Sevilla. He's 23. He played a bit for Spain under 21s, I think 3 times was his appearances for them. I sent you lads some notes and I can't find them here. Oh, yeah, got it. Sorry, I had to just switch tabs. Starting right back for them last season. Previous season, he was on loan at Getafe. Interestingly, from February 2025, Sevilla got some severe financial problems, so they're going to have to sell. There was some talk of him going to Zenit St. Petersburg. Then they bid around 10 million euros. I don't know if that would be the fee now. He signed a new contract until 2028, pretty recently as well, and his release clause is reported 30 million, but they would deal at a lower price than that. I had a look this summer. They don't seem to have made any major sales or signings. I mean, one of the signs they made was Odysseos Kodimos on loan from Newcastle, and I think that's kind of the market they're shopping in. I haven't seen any footage of him playing at all, but Temps has, so Temps is going to tell us a bit about him.
Well, I think you're very comfortable in possession, kind of profiles like a midfielder in possession, doesn't panic on the ball, looks to find his pass. By no means a brute, but quite a finesse defender. Stays on his feet, seems good on an island in a one-on-one situation, and all-round tidy player, as you'd expect anyone that we're looking at in a top European league to be. Is he going to trouble Aina and Nico for a starting berth? No. I think he again falls into that capable and backup category that might get some outings on a Thursday night in the cup. So we do need depth in this position, which is what we're looking for. I don't think we're seeking to spend any significant piece of our transfer budget on a backup fullback. I think they'll feel there's a cost-effective deal to be done here to extract a player from a club in relative financial distress. But again, I do like Cash. I see this as a guy that's coming in to back up two extremely established defenders who'll be hard to displace.
Did I say earlier about Marco Stamenic going? It was in my head. Did I actually say or not?
I think so.
No, Marco Stamenic, Forest announced he left at 1 o'clock when I was driving, so I missed it. He's gone to Swansea. BBC says a fee of more than £2 million. We signed him a year ago for 4.6. We sent him on loan to Olympiacos, and that'll probably cover the loan and fee. So perhaps we just about broke even on that one. Pete, any thoughts on the Sevilla fullback? I mean, he was their starting right back last season. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at him at all, though.
I've watched one YouTube video, probably the same one that Temps has, judging by the Ibiza beats that were coming out of his computer when we started. I haven't got an awful lot to say about him because he's not someone who was on my radar before, but he's obviously played a lot of football at a high level last season. If you look at his FBref profile, it's based on 2,900 odd minutes. So, there's plenty of data there. He doesn't sort of stand out massively in any way, apart from his numbers for interceptions are incredibly high. So I guess that suggests a level of intelligence to his play. And like Temps, I think he looks neat and tidy. Nothing in there that sort of massively concerned me. I like his mobility. He seems pretty agile and relatively quick with a turn of pace when he needs to. But beyond that, there's not an awful lot I can say. And like you've already identified, I'd be very surprised if he's coming in to take the very first choice role. But we clearly need options at fullback as a sort of high priority right now. So for the money that's being talked about, say £9 million odd, that's really not an awful lot for someone who's played a lot of minutes in the last 12 months at a high level of football. So fingers crossed, it sounds like on paper it would be a decent deal for us.
Cool. I think that covers all the stuff today. Almost 800 people with us, which is great. So do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. Some reports it's a €9 million deal. A few people in the chat are saying it's pretty good for if he is going to be a backup right back. Having not seen him play, the fee's not bad. I'd like to see more of him. Right. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to add? Anything we've missed, Michael Temple?
Well, question for the boys. So Ryan Yates started 18 Premier League games last season. Always finds a way into the side. How many Premier League games do you think Yates is going to start this time around?
Gosh, with injuries and AFCON, I don't know. I mean, 10. I don't know. Something.
I think that's the kind of par answer, isn't it? Because we are clearly looking to find those players that can, on merit, displace certain others by being multifaceted. But I think there's always a space for that type of player, and there's a reason why he's selected again and again. Clearly now his competition for places is greater than ever. You'll have to dig deeper than ever to find a way. But yeah, I think 10 is probably the par for Yates' hopes of starts this year. A few of the commenters more in the kind of 6 to 7 space.
We do have European games as well. But yeah, go on, Pete.
I think you might see him play more of a role in Europe potentially. I think that it's probably not unfair to say this is going to be Yates' biggest challenge of a career that has been challenge after challenge, obstacle after obstacle, and he, as we've said so many times, he's risen to every single one, and he's outsmarted people who talk about football as experts, and he's constantly confounded the critics, both externally but also within our own supporter base. So I would never ever bet against Ryan Yates, but it does feel like he's got a hell of a challenge on his hands this time round, and certainly a much more difficult challenge than he's ever had before. So it's going to be fascinating watching him try and rise to another challenge. As I've said, I would never back against him. It's going to be difficult, but I guess either he's going to be able to find a way, or it may be that this is the sort of last season of the Forest Ryan Yates partnership, I guess, because he's been pretty vocal about being someone who wants to play games and wants to play more games than he did last season. So unless he can find a way, I'm not sure whether we'll be seeing an awful lot more of him. But I really hope he can have a role, because he's so important in the way that he carries himself, in the things that he can do, and he does bring attributes that we don't have otherwise. So yeah, fingers crossed we get to see a really good fight and he comes out on top of some of it.
Do you think Dominguez might be at more risk longer term? I mean, he's injured, so you can't really think about him playing until late autumn or something like that. But I don't know. Is he the one that's potentially at risk of a sale? Maybe. Yates has got the pure profit academy thing. I've got absolutely no idea what his transfer value is, to be honest. But I don't know, Terence, is Dominguez the one we might be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, his momentum is going to be a challenge for Dominguez, isn't it? Getting back fit first and foremost after pretty major surgery, and then finding his way in. Yates would have stolen a march from him by that point in terms of minutes and understanding the chemistry of the players around him. So yeah, maybe so. I think it's fascinating. Those two were great servants last year and played such an important role. I think Dominguez in particular, is one of the unsung heroes, slightly under the radar, but had some really telling contributions. So yeah, these haven't been disposable players at this point. They've been extremely important, but the minutes can only be shared so many ways, and fascinating to see how this one shapes up.
Where would you we've gone into all of the conversation here. Where would you rank a midfield three of Anderson, Gibbs-White, and we'll say Luiz in the Premier League terms, Pete?
Well, it makes me think of the Newcastle midfield three instantly, with three players of real genuine class who bring an awful lot of different attributes to the table. I've always really admired that three. I think I need some time to have a think through them, but it will be right up there.
I think Man U and Spurs would take that trio, right?
Well, I'll put this graphic up. One of the questions we're going to ask from tomorrow, I think it was from Alan Jones, is how many of our team would get into our teams we want to be rivaling. He said Spurs, Newcastle, Villa. It's not a perfect exercise, but I took their teams from the weekend. And if you look at the midfields on screen, again, I don't think this is Spurs' best midfield, but they played Pat Matasar, Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall. Villa played Kamara, Onana, Tielemans, and Newcastle's was Joelinton, Tonali, Guimaraes. I mean, the Spurs one, I wouldn't take any of them.
No, none of the Spurs players get into the current Forest team, but like you said, it's probably not their best. But they've got
Polina, Bentancur, Bissouma's in the doghouse, isn't it?
Even then, I'm not making any changes with Spurs, to be honest. I wouldn't even be remotely tempted. Villa's a different story. I think Kamara will be probably in my sort of. I spoke earlier about my sort of preconceptions about what Forest need. In my sort of dream world, I think Kamara is the perfect player to go alongside Elliot Anderson and Morgan Gibbs-White. So I'd take him in a flash. And it's hard to speak about the Newcastle trio because they are very much that, aren't they? They are a trio. I don't think Newcastle fans would be swapping with us. I probably wouldn't do the swap either, just because I'm attached to what we've got. But they're a fantastic three who bring insane intensity as well as massive quality, and Joelinton's otherworldly enormousness in just being this massive beast in the middle of the pitch who terrifies me every time I play them.
I think so. I mean, the real elite clubs have got top midfields, Rice, Zubimendi, Odegaard, etc. But I wouldn't trade. I think the Newcastle one's really good, and I think Kamara's really good. But I'm not trading any of our three for outside that group off the top of my head, personally. I mean, there's like Bruno Fernandes and players like that, but it feels to me like a very, very strong midfield. Temps, where would you be at on those players on screen?
You wouldn't take Guimaraes for Douglas Luiz. You wouldn't take Kudus or Elanga for Dan Ndoye. I think they're the most debatable swaps. But yeah, of course, we're attached to the Forest boys after what they've done for us both at the weekend and last season.
Yeah. Wingers are probably another conversation. You've got Brennan on the screen and Elanga, obviously. But just looking at the midfield, certainly. Right, we'll pick up more of that tomorrow, I think. The match preview with Pete and Mikey, I think, is the plan. Pete, any final thoughts from you before we go?
No, nothing to add, I don't think. It was an interesting chat, covered a lot of different ground. Enjoyed that, thanks.
Yeah, it's good. Check out the chat with James Belshaw and Dan Story if you haven't already. Really enjoyed that yesterday. get Belly on more. He's made it into the titles, so my plan is to get him on more because I think he's really insightful. So looking forward to doing that. I mean, Minnie's plug a charity thing for absolutely ages. Paul Lindsay, who's a regular listener, and he's raised over 20 grand for the Alzheimer's Society. If you go, I'll put his Just Giving link on his in the description. He's doing another trek, and he's got a charity auction. If you know any Liverpool fans who want signed Carragher and Gerrard boots and pictures all framed up and everything, all proceeds to the Alzheimer's Society, drop him a message. It's at PN Lindsay on Twitter, LINDSAY. So do check that out. Like I say, back tomorrow with Mikey and Pete. No, probably actually that'll come out on Friday. Thinking off the top of my head, that'll be on Friday. It'll be recorded tomorrow. Tom Williams tomorrow on Callum Wendo, and the transfer chat is the plan. Right, Temps, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas. See you soon.
Pete, thank you very much.
Cheers, Matt. I'm really looking forward to listening to Tom Williams on Callum Wendo tomorrow. So I think that'll be a really good to get to know the player a bit more. And just one last thing before we go, just want to join James Preston. Join James Preston in thanking Temps for injecting a little sanity, because otherwise it would clearly just be me and Matt talking absolute nonsense, apparently. So good to have you, mate. Thanks for coming along.
I think he means about the Guimaraes swap. I think that's what you'd be taken to task on, that Bruno probably could get in our midfield. I don't know.
Oh, of course he could, yeah. I don't think I said that he wouldn't, to be fair. Just sentimentally, I wouldn't swap R3 for another 3.
No, yeah, like Pete said, Newcastle fans aren't swapping, and R3 are like, Bruno Guimaraes is a fantastic player, and Tonali as well. Joel Linton.
Oh, I don't apologise now. You've lost a few listeners on this one.
We've still got 725, and we're waffling on, so we've lost one or two. Right, do us a favour if you haven't already, as mentioned, hit like, hit subscribe. Try and get to 15,000, 20,000, whatever. That'd be great. Do consider membership or Patreon. Lots of new members recently, which is fantastic, or a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, and I do read them all. Oh yeah, Pete Blackburn's put in something really important that we totally forgot from last night. You tell us, Pete.
Sorry, I only remembered too late because I saw a comment in the chat reminding us that we hadn't spoken about the PFA team of the season. I mean, I'm not sure what else we can say about it apart from I doubt any of us could have possibly imagined would have been in this place 4 or 5 years ago, celebrating that incredible achievement of a couple of our players being in the best team of the season, and quite a few others presumably ranking pretty high in the list as well. So something to be very proud of, I think, and a nice moment to reflect on how far we've come.
I had to do a bit of a double take to see Chris Wood and Matt Sells in that company, not because they don't deserve it. We've watched them all season last year, absolutely bossing it. But there is still something special about seeing them lined up in the suits next to Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk, thinking, they've earned their place on that stage. Yeah,
I put the photo out on Facebook. I mean, the team of the year, they were on the stage then with Van Dijk, with Saliba and Gabriel. It could have been Milenkovic or Murillo up there as well. Rice, Gravenberch, Alexis McAllister, who looked pretty tiny when he was lined up next to everyone. Alexander Isak, who didn't make an appearance, obviously. And Kirkez was the left back, another top player. So there you go. Right. Lovely stuff. We shall be back tomorrow. Enjoyed that a lot. But if we don't see you then, we shall see you soon.